It is that time once again, people, for the Heirloom Radio Show. And I want to take the time to thank everybody for joining me. I am your host, Dennis Brown, author of the book, The Family Heirloom, which is available now at Amazon.com as well as BarnesandNoble.com. And you know the book is sort of like a roadmap on life. You know, in school, many times you get a syllabus and you get to see where it is that you're supposed to be throughout the semester. You get to see how it is that you're supposed to progress. And at the end of the semester, you can sort of look and see where you're at and reconcile that with the syllabus. But on life, nobody gives you a syllabus. Nobody gives you a roadmap. You know, oftentimes nobody tells you by a certain age you should be at this point in your life, or you should know this and you should have these skills developed. Nobody tells you what it is that you're going to be up against. So I set out to write a book that bridged that gap, you know, and it was inspired by my daughter. I was thinking, what is it that I would want her to know if for some reason I wasn't here anymore? So, you know, it serves several purposes, but, you know, it's a roadmap and it's for everybody, and it covers relationships, personal development, motivation, you know, strategies for getting a leg up on the competition and being successful in a more and more competitive world that we live in today. So make sure you pick up a copy of that. Make sure you tell a friend about it. And make sure you tell a friend to tune into the Heirloom Radio Show every week. And, you know, I really want to take the time to thank everybody who's already bought the book and everybody who tunes into the podcast and read the blogs every week. You know, every week I post them up. I really, really appreciate y'all. And, you know, if you like the book, make sure you pass it on to a friend. Make sure you tell them about it. But I appreciate everybody who went out and have gone out and supported the things that I've done so far. And I got a lot more in store, so, you know, stay tuned. But anyway, you know, did you guys see that story in the news of the guy who, and it's not funny, I don't know why I'm laughing. The story just tickled me for whatever reason. You know, a guy was told by doctors that he had a few months to live. You know, he was gonna die in a couple of months. I guess he had cancer or something like that, and they told him, you know, you only have a few months to live. And so, you know, thinking it was almost his time to go out, he went, he sold his house. You know, he emptied out his bank account, he maxed out his credit cards, and he just like balled the fuck out. He went on these lavish vacations, and, you know, he just did the things that he had always wanted to do, but I guess had never had the opportunity to do because he was weighed down by obligations. And now he saw this as his opportunity to just, hey, you know, let me take these last couple of months I have and do what I want to do, have fun and enjoy my last few months on this earth. Well, you know, after selling his home and going on these lavish vacations and doing all of that, he came back and the doctors told him that they made a mistake. Oh shit. They told him that, you know, it was a mistake. We're sorry. You're not gonna die in a couple of months. We made a mistake here at the hospital. So now this poor guy is homeless. Him and his wife are homeless. They don't have any savings, nothing. I mean, they literally don't have anything anymore. And what, you know, to me is real fucked up because he did all of this based on the doctor's word. But now, naturally, the credit card companies is out on his back. They want their money, of course. So which leads me to the question, should compassion come into play in business? You know, should the credit card companies be like, hey, the doctors made a mistake. We understand from a human perspective why it is that you went and maxed out your credit cards and did all that. We're going to go ahead and forgive your debt, you know, because you did what anybody would do. And a lot of people are saying that. You know, I showed this story to a lot of people and they was like, you know, the credit card company should just forgive his debt. He did what anybody should do. But it's hard to argue that from a business standpoint, because the credit card companies are running a business. If they loan you money, they expect them to make their money back with interest because that's how they earn their living. And they have a huge payroll. They have a lot of expenses. And from a business standpoint, they're looking at it like, okay, he maxed out his credit cards. He thought he was going to die. So he obviously had no intention on paying us back. He was going to take our money and just fuck us over. Why should we have compassion for a guy like this? You know, and on the other side of the argument, it's like, hey, well, he did what anybody would do. You know, you got a couple months to live. You put yourself in that position and tell me you wouldn't do the exact same thing. But it's hard to argue compassion from a purely business standpoint. because it's hard to say, hey, let me forgive this guy's debt. You know, when you're looking at your monthly payroll and you're looking at your monthly expenses for running that business, you can't let people slide like that. So that story brought me to the topic of today's show. One of the topics of today's show: should compassion come into play in business? And you guys feel free to email me and leave your comments on this. I want to hear you guys' opinion about it. You know, I personally think that people saying that the credit card company should forgive his debt are completely wrong. They shouldn't forgive his debt. I think the hospital should be on the hook for all of that, for reimbursing everything, for getting his house back, for getting his credit card debt paid off, you know, for putting him and his wife back into the position that they were in before they got that bogus news. You know, I think the hospital and the doctors are completely 100% responsible. And I even had people disagree with me on that. They were like, no, he was responsible. It was his actions. He made the decision to go out and max his credit card. There's plenty of people who get that diagnosis who don't do that. So no, the doctors aren't responsible for reimbursing him. But if you're acting on false information from a trusted source, such as your medical doctor, who you trust them to give you accurate information based on your health or for your health, then it's completely understandable that you're going to act based off the information that they give you. And it wasn't an overreaction. Who am I to say? I don't know if it was an overreaction, him maxing out his credit cards and going and traveling and doing all of that. Some people say it's an overreaction, but you don't know until you're in that position. Personally, I think I would have did the same exact thing. I would have did everything that I wanted to do. I would have been all over the place. So I understand where the guy was coming from. Do I feel like the credit card company should have compassion on him and forgive his debt? No, I personally don't, because they're running a business. I believe that compassion has a place in business, but I can understand when you're looking at the balance sheet and you're looking at the income statement and you're looking at your expenses, how it's hard to be compassionate and not look totally at the bottom line. So I don't think the credit card company should have to eat that loss, but I don't think the guy should be reliable for it either. I think the blame is squarely on the doctors, because it was their false information that led to his quote unquote overreaction of spending all of his money. And I don't know if the couple had kids or not. They didn't mention that in the story, which, you know, if they do, then that brings a whole nother dynamic into the story, in which I don't know if I would sympathize with them going out and spending all their money like that and, you know, passing that debt down to their kids. But since I don't know if they have kids, I'm giving my perspective from the standpoint of them not having any. So the question is, when should compassion come into play in business? Should it always be present? Or is there a time to just be stone cold about your business? You know, if you take an example like a hospital, you know, I've been to the emergency room on a couple of occasions, and they literally don't let you see a doctor until that intake officer comes in and asks you your insurance information. If you have insurance, do you have your insurance card? Like, the doctor literally doesn't come in there until you've seen that person. You know, the nurse will take your vitals and they'll, you know, take your blood pressure and whatnot. They'll put you in a room, and the first person that comes to greet you in the room is that person with the computer, you know, asking your insurance information, which is, again, it's understandable because they're running a business. They're in the business of healing people, and nobody in that hospital gets paid unless they identify a way of them getting compensation for the services that they're providing. So on the one hand, I understand, but I know a guy who cut his hand all the way open and he hit some type of artery, and, you know, he lost so much blood that he almost died. And they got him patched up. They got the bleeding to stop and whatnot. And they got a cast, and it was like, we definitely need you to stay overnight. We definitely need you to stay overnight. You know, once they got the bleeding stopped and whatnot. And then they came in and they asked him for his insurance information. Well, he didn't have any. And about 10 minutes later, they came back and was like, you know what? You may be cleared to go home tonight. You should be fine. Just keep an eye on it and monitor it. Which blew my mind, you know, because something like that, you would expect compassion to come into play in a scenario like that. You know, I mean, you're talking about a human life now, but, you know, the bottom line came into play. They could have used that bed for somebody else who has insurance. So from the outside looking in, to a person like me That's real messed up. They should have let him stay. You know, compassion should have came into play. He may not have insurance, but he's a human being. You know, they should have kept him there and monitored him. But, you know, it's hard to argue that argument with somebody that's in the accounting department that's looking at all of the accounts payable that's coming in. You know, all of the bills that's piling up, all of the employees' salaries that they have to pay, all of the medical supplies that they have to buy, you know, the food that they have to stock for the hospital. I mean, there's all types of expenses that come into play that makes it hard to be compassionate and show compassion and have compassion for this one person when you got so many people in the hospital that relies on the income they take in order to take care of their employees. So, you know, in a situation, in a scenario like that with a hospital, when does compassion come into play? And when should it just be straight up 100% about business? You know, it's hard to, many times it's hard to differentiate between, you know, being in business mode and being in just human compassion mode. But the thing is, there is a balance. You don't want to lean towards one extreme, because when you're just completely compassionate, you're going to kill your bottom line and you won't be in business for long. You know, if you're just stone cold all the time about business, you may be successful and you may have a long run, but eventually it's going to catch up to you, because people are going to stop doing business with you because they're going to think you don't have a human side. So there's a happy medium and there's a balance there that if you're going into business that you need to find and that you need to develop. And I want to help you and give you some examples on how to develop that. And, you know, companies have been using compassion strategically in their business plan for the longest now, you know, and sometimes it's done in a manipulative way. Other times it's done from a very, very sincere place, and they just